And so we've gone over some of his biographical information. Again, he is a graduate of Los Altos High School, so let's welcome him back.
Thanks, guys. How are you?
Good.
Yeah? Is this the third period for you?
Yeah.
And which class is this usually? English Lit? Okay. Any journalism-specific students here, or people that are interested in the talent or writing or journalism in the back?
Yeah, I wrote that.
Okay, cool. Well, here's what I'll do. I'll tell you just kind of my background and how I got started, what I do on a daily basis, but I need you guys to also participate. So ask your questions. As I'm talking, if something pops into your head, raise your hand, and we'll have a two-way conversation, so it won't be anything that's too boring for you guys, hopefully. So I'll tell you how I started. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to see you. I graduated in 1989 from Los Altos High, and I wrote for the Talon. Mr. Rosenberg was my English teacher and my Talon, I guess, guru. He ran the Talon at that point. You guys know Mr. Rosenberg?
Yeah.
Okay. I still have to call him Mr. Rosenberg, even though I can call him Galen now. Went to Egan, came to Los Altos High School, and I always wanted to know, I knew early on that I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to go into sports or news or both. So I started writing for the Talon, had a great time doing that. From here, I went to San Diego State University, and there also wrote for the school newspaper. Down there it was called the Daily Aztec, and had a great time, really built up my skills. But one thing as I developed in my career, some of the fundamentals, even to this day, I'll go to work in a couple hours from now, to this day, a lot of my fundamental skills in writing came at your age. I learned it at this level, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So what you learn here, regardless what direction you want to go in your career, you'll learn a lot of core fundamental skills here. So when people say, oh, college is great, but those skills, some baseline skills you're going to learn at this level, or have already learned. So don't discount what you get here at Los Altos High. At San Diego State, wrote for the Aztec, also worked for the San Diego Chargers, which is a football team. Anyone football fans here? NFL, okay, so you know the Chargers. And then from there, in television, what you want to do is you kind of get your resume tape together. And does anyone know what a resume tape is? Okay, good. So you're halfway there. So a resume is you list off all your accomplishments, your experience. A resume tape in television, you don't really hand out a resume because they just want to see what you look like on camera, in the studio or in the field. So it's basically your resume on tape, except you're not listing Los Altos High School class of '89, San Diego State class of '93. You're just on camera doing a mock sportscast or a mock newscast. So it's 5 minutes long, and you send it to all the stations wherever you want to try to work. So I sent 40 tapes out to different parts of the country. And how many job offers did I get? Anyone want to take a guess? 0.
Oh.
So then I sent another 20 tapes out around the country. How many job offers did I get? 0. Yeah. And so then I'm thinking, okay, I really suck. I'm not going to be good. So maybe I shouldn't go into journalism or broadcast journalism. And so several months go by. I'm still working for the Chargers, but you just have to keep going at it, So a lot of people help me and say, you know what, you're pretty good. You have good fundamental skills. Something's going to work for you. So you're going to get a break. And finally, I think it was like resume tape number 76 or 77. A little TV station in Yuma, Arizona called me and said, hey, you're the guy, we want to hire you. So I finally got my break. I worked in Yuma, which is a small little town in Arizona. From Yuma, I was there for a couple of years. Then I went to Fresno, the NBC station in Fresno, which is here in the Central Valley, and then here to the Bay Area. And I've been here since 1998. So I've been here quite a while. And it's great because this is where I grew up. Obviously, came here to school, so it's like I'm back home. Okay, any questions so far? I need some questions. Come my way. A few things that, whether you go into journalism or not, in terms of my writing style, my preparation. Actually, let me tell you my day in the life now of work, my workflow here. So I do the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 11 o'clock news. So I'll go to work usually at around 3 o'clock. But when I wake up, through the morning, I'll always kind of figure out what's going on in the world, right? Whether it's the crisis in Ukraine right now, or our economy, or the drought, or what the Giants or 49ers are doing. Whatever is making news, I'll kind of keep tabs on as the morning progresses. I'll check Twitter, I'll be reading the newspapers, I'll watch some CNN, I'll watch some ESPN, so it's kind of just throughout the day I'll find out what's going on. That way when I get to work at 3 p.m., I don't have to ask anyone, hey, what's going on today, because you would come in unprepared. So I have an idea, a really good idea of what's going on throughout the day. Then when we get into work at 3 o'clock, there's a big meeting. It's like this, except it's around a big circular table, and everyone's talking about story ideas, about what we want to cover on the news tonight. So that's a critical process because there's, in the Bay Area, or any market you work in, any city you work in, there's hundreds of things that are happening. So how do you dwindle hundreds of items into maybe 40 stories that you're going to do that day? So a lot of people are discussing, and that's where it's a great collaboration comes in. So just think if we were in the newsroom right now. You're a reporter, you're a news director, you're an anchor, you're a photographer, you're a writer. So all of us get together and we pitch ideas, Where are you from? What street do you live on?
Beacon Street.
Okay, so what's your name?
Raphael.
So Raphael says, all right, there's something going on Beacon Street. I think it's really important. This is why we need to cover it tonight. And then you might say, oh, you know what, there's also something happening in downtown Los Altos we need to cover. Or something's happening in Oakland this evening we need to do. So it's a big collaboration of what we want to cover, what impacts the Bay Area the most, and also what makes for a good story. We are in the business of news, but we also want to tell a good story. We don't want to just say, this is what happened on Beacon Street, and that's the story. We want to tell why it's important, why it matters, and we want to make it interesting as well. So it's a good process. From 3 to 3:45 or 3 to 3:30, we just kind of chisel away of what's important for us to cover for those evening newscasts. And then we give everyone their assignment, reporters go their way, and then you see your reporters, reporting from Oakland or San Francisco or Los Altos, they're doing their thing. So that's how it gets, that's a quick process of telling you how it all gets dwindled down to what we're covering. And then we do the same thing for the 11 o'clock news. Each newscast is different. 5 p.m., different from the 6 p.m., different from the 11 p.m., because there's so many things to cover. Okay, questions? I need some questions, yes.
Is it hard to talk into the camera?
You get used to it. So my first night in Yuma, my first night on television, I'm nervous as heck, right? Because you're nervous, the camera's on you, it's live TV, and I was first job out of college, I'm 23 years old, and they're like, okay, Raj, new sportscaster, this is going to be great, we're in commercial break, so I'm sitting, I'm sitting down, camera's right in front of me, I'm ready to go, and I see the red light on, they're like, all right, coming out to you in 3, 2, 1, you're on, this means you're on. So I freeze up, I realize I'm chewing gum, and at that point I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm chewing gum, what the heck am I going to do? So camera's on, lights on, everyone in Yuma, Arizona, NBC is watching me. And I kind of screwed up, right? I turned this way and spit out my gum. So on camera, there's this gum flying out of my mouth. It's like if you're watching at home, you're watching sports and this guy turns away, spits out gum. And I was like, oh my God. I turned back to the camera. My co-anchors are just like, oh, who is this idiot that we just hired? And I proceeded to do the whole sportscast, which actually was a big victory for me. I did 4 minutes of talking into the camera, and I was nervous as heck to answer your question, but I got it done. But I'd spit out my gum. And so I thought, okay, well, I made it to TV. I got one night in, they're gonna fire me in the morning, because you can't do that on TV. And so I collected my things that night, went back home. Remember, this was the 11 o'clock news, 11 p.m. I go back home, and I was just bummed out. So I went up to my little condo complex, and there was a little hot tub down below. It's shared hot tub and a pool with the whole complex. So I grab a drink, go down to the condo, or go down to the hot tub, just depressed, but happy that at least I got one night on TV before I'm gonna get fired. And there were some ladies in there, and I kind of sit down, and they're like, young man, what's wrong? I said, I had a bad day at work, don't worry about it. And they're like, oh, don't worry, we all have bad days at work. In fact, it can't be as bad as the guy we saw on NBC tonight. This guy spit out his gum on TV. I picked up my drink and just got out of the hot tub and So, go to work the next day. and expecting them to give me papers to sign off and say, I've been terminated. And I walk into the newsroom and everyone starts clapping. I'm like, oh, what the heck's going on? And I get to my desk and my boss, my news director at the time, had went to Costco and bought 500 packs of gum. And they spread it all across my table. And everyone just started clapping. And he said, you did fine, you did great. The good news is it can't get any worse for you. And what great perspective is that? That was a perfect thing to tell me. Then I had no pressure. From that night on, it can't get any worse, right? So, yes, I do get nervous. I was nervous that night, but after that, it was the greatest thing ever because you get your big mistake out of the way right away. So say at one point in your academic, your Los Altos High School career, you're gonna get a bad grade on a test. Well, at least get that bad grade your first test because then I'm never gonna get a bad grade again. So you don't have that pressure. So it is funny. But yeah, you get nervous. There's a good nervous. When I go on tonight, I'm not going to be nervous because I've been doing it for 20 years now, but there's a good excitement that comes. And I hope, and I think other people will tell you this in whatever career they're in, hopefully they'll tell you this, that no matter how long they've been doing it, there's still some sort of joy and excitement that comes every time they do it. And that's something that, I really value about my job. And for your dads or moms or relatives, whoever, hopefully they're going to work at their profession to really enjoy and get into what they're doing. So, and that's why it's so cool that you guys, you're a landscaper. If you really enjoy it, you'll never have a job. It'll be very easy for you. You're a teacher. Teachers usually love their profession, which is great. And you can tell when teachers are really passionate about their work. So if you can find that, it'll be really cool. Okay, questions? Come on, you gotta keep it coming. Yes, in the back.
How did you decide on broadcasting journalism versus written journalism?
I just preferred it. I like the broadcast element. It was just that live TV element is just really attractive to me. Now I love print journalism, and to be a good broadcast journalist, you have to be a good print journalist. There's some people that get away with it, but it catches up to them. Writing is writing. For your English papers, your journalism articles, magazine articles, if you're a scientific writer in journals, writing is writing. You have to have just a good core, basic fundamental skills, and you keep building from there. But broadcast was always just more exciting to me because of that live element. But I did a lot of print writing as well. Yes?
Did you ever consider being an actor?
I've never considered being an actor. A lot of people in TV were acting majors or wanted to go into acting, because it's a form of presentation and live performance. It's a good question, but no, acting was never my thing. Just my skill or my passion was writing, and this is just how it's manifesting, which is on TV. Yes?
What kept you going after you kept getting rejected the first few times?
That's good. What keeps you going after you keep getting rejected? Just sure determination. I just had to, I'd been from the Egan paper to the Los Altos paper to the San Diego State paper. This is what I did. I wanted to be a writer, and no one was going to stop me, even though they rejected me. In my field, though, it is fairly common to get rejected over and over and over again. And in that sense, it's a little bit like acting. Actors will tell you the same thing. Whether it's Brad Pitt or Bradley Cooper or whatever, they have gotten rejected from a lot more roles. They've gotten rejected more than they've gotten, the part. So it's just, you just have to believe in yourself, and hopefully you have a good support group of friends or family or teachers that say, hey, keep at it, keep at it. And that, I think, applies to a lot of industries. If you just give up your first time, or your 5th time, or 10th time, don't. Keep going at it, yeah.
How many reporters are actually at the place they say they are, not from the green screen?
The only people in front of it's a good question. How many reporters are actually on location and not just in front of the green screen? The only people in front of the green screen. Does everyone know what a green screen is? Yeah. It's just the screen. It's the weather people. The weathercasters are in front of the green screen because then they can say, okay, down here in Florida, up here in Seattle, they can point to the map. So the weather people are on the green screen. All the other reporters, unlike the Daily Show, all the other reporters are actually in San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, Los Altos, wherever they are. Yes.
So on the thing we were reading, it was that.
Yeah.
But it said that you were the first Indian news reporter in your time. Do you associate with being Indian more or being more American?
Both. I think there's a lot of people here that are culturally diverse in this area. I'm really proud of my Indian heritage and ethnicity, but at the same time, I grew up here. So both. I'm proud of being, Indian. I'm proud of being American, and it's something that's, to me, it's just an asset. I have a dual culture, and it was great. And I was the first, Indian sportscaster in the country, and at that point, it was, when all these sent out all these tapes to different stations, they just thought I was either Mexican or black. They didn't know. So like, oh, okay, wow, you're African American. I'm like, well, not really, but it's cool if you want to call me that. Oh, so you must be Mexican. Not really, but that's what you want to say, that's fine. So, because I was the first, they had no idea. And so it was that kind of just that education for everyone, because there have been no Indian sportscasters. And now, you turn on the TV, you turn on ESPN or NBC or any other markets around the country, there's plenty of Indian sportscasters. So it was kind of cool in that sense to kind of break the mold. And it wasn't like they weren't hiring Indian sportscasters because they didn't want to hire an Indian sportscaster. There were just not many Indians getting in the field at that point. Now there's plenty on TV. You see all sorts of Indians on there. Okay, questions? Keep them coming. Yes?
Had your parents been in a similar field to you?
I'm from a family, many people in my family are journalists and writers, so yes. Not specifically my parents, but I have uncles and cousins that were writers, and so it's kind of family DNA in that sense. Some are doctors, some are in business, and some are writers. So yes, I did have a little advantage there, just kind of it seeped in at the house, yeah.
So I know you've interviewed a lot of famous people. What is that like? And does it make you really nervous?
Good. It's a good nervous. So I think you guys have seen a couple of the interviews, Pope Bronson and Jimmy Fallon. It's fun. I mean, Jimmy Fallon's coming in, and you get to spend 3 hours with them, and most of the things that you chat about don't get on TV, because if I talk to you in 3 hours, we're going to talk a lot of things, or even 1 hour. We're going to talk about a lot of things. But that clip that you saw, the segment you saw, was 3 minutes. So it's cool to really get to know someone. So it's not a nervous, but it's an excitement. And it doesn't have to be someone famous like Jimmy Fallon or Pope Bronson, an award-winning author. It could be someone just a regular, everyday person, because everyone has that story. I don't think you're famous, or at least not yet, but I'm sure you have a fascinating story about your family or your interests or your school or something. And so that's what I love. I love stories about people. And when you do prep for an interview, whether it's someone famous or not, and again, this can apply for anything, just do your homework. Go in there and try to get everything about, we'll say, Jimmy Fallon. I researched that. And Jimmy Fallon's given so many interviews in these last couple of months because, his new position at The Tonight Show. I looked at the previous interviews that journalists have done, and that was part of my prep. And I just thought, I don't want to be the same guy. I don't want to ask him the same questions that the New York Times have asked him, or that NBC in LA has asked him, or NBC in Dallas. I have to come up with something different to make it unique, to make my segment unique. And so then you just keep reading, researching, talking to people. I called people at NBC in New York and said, hey, what's he like just, off camera in the newsroom? They go, oh, he's a great guy. I talked to friends, I read articles, and then I was able to come up with things that were unique that I hadn't seen before. Him talking about having a child. They had struggled, he and his wife, to have a child, so they went through IVF, in vitro fertilization. I felt that was interesting. It wasn't just, hey, tell me about The Tonight Show, tell me about your comedy. I said, I read that you and your wife had trouble conceiving. How difficult was that, or how challenging was that? Got a great answer out of it, Talked about his wife being from the Bay Area. No one knew that. I didn't know that until I found this little clip of some high school in Marin County. I said, hey, so you're kind of a Bay Area guy. He goes, this is Jimmy Fallon. He goes, yeah, everyone thinks I'm a New Yorker, but my wife and my in-laws are here. So I love the Bay Area. So just little teeny tidbits that can turn into something really nice. Yes?
Who were you most excited about interviewing?
Jimmy Fallon was one of them. He was pretty fun. Colin Powell, the former general here, because of his role in the Iraq War. That was exciting and a little nerve-wracking because this is a guy that's, so instrumental to this country and in our history of this country going to war. Colin Powell was very interesting. Jimmy Fallon. This coming Monday, I think I'm interviewing Barry Bonds, the former Giant player. That'll be interesting because we're not going to just talk baseball. We're going to talk about steroid use and his role and why, in theory, he might have been blackballed by Major League Baseball. So that'll be interesting. So the next couple of days over the weekend, I'll be prepping for that interview. Even though I know everything about Barry Bonds, but I still want to prep and know more than I think. Yes.
So are you in charge of editing what goes on TV, like what segments of the interview, or is that someone else's job?
It's a collaboration. So I'll be obviously very instrumental of what I want, what direction I want to take that interview, or what makes it on TV. I work with a great producer. She'll also say, "Ooh, I like this part. Let's not use that part." And then our photographer will also. So it's a team. We sit there, and usually we're on the same page. Like any good team, you're on the same page. Whether it's a soccer team, baseball team, or a journalism team, you all kind of identify what the good stuff is in that interview. And then it's a time factor. There's usually a lot of good things, but you only have 3 minutes to get it in. You just chatted with someone for an hour. How do you get that down to 3 minutes? So it's a fun process. We sit in a little dark editing room and we call out shots and look at the video and look at the sound, and it's exciting. Yes.
How do you narrow down what news goes on to the TV?
Same way. That round table at 3 p.m. when everyone talks, and sometimes it gets heated. Hey, we really need to cover this thing in Palo Alto. It's about the lack of parking. It's really important, I think, for Stanford students, for community people that live in the area that are going to Palo Alto for lunch, or business people there. It's a really hot button issue, parking problems in Palo Alto. Someone else might say, that's lame, who cares? That sounds boring. Let's do rising crime statistics in Oakland. And so you're just kind of battling back and forth in a healthy debate of what makes it up. And hopefully you have really good input and you're able to pick the stories that matter. So it's a fluid situation. Yes?
What person inspires you the most?
Good question. Growing up, there was a writer who, and yes, now I do remember Writers Week. So 1988, I was a junior here, and during Writers Week, we had a sports writer named Mark Purdy. He writes for the San Jose Mercury News, and he's a sports columnist. And I just thought he was the greatest writer. So he's one of I don't have one specific, but he's one of the journalists that inspired me the most. Because his style was just witty, it was sharp, he's well researched into his topics. So I loved him on a local level. And then he comes to the Writers Week to speak. I was like, oh, this is great. He's coming to my campus to speak. In terms of sports broadcasting, Bob Costas is I think just did a great job. A guy that used to work for ABC News a little before your time, his name was Peter Jennings. He was an anchor, and he was wonderful. Just in how he communicates, a lot of information happening in real time, how he digests it, and then delivers it on camera, live. He was exceptional. So Bob Costas, Mark Purdy, Peter Jennings are 3 guys that stick out to me in terms of who I looked up to the most. But I always tried to make sure that I didn't duplicate anyone. I wasn't trying to be a copy of those guys. I just took their things and made it my own. Took input from Bob Costas, Mark Purdy, Peter Jennings, and then made sure I had it in my own voice and my own thoughts. Because you don't want to just copy someone, but you want to take their good stuff and make it into your own. Yes?
So since you're a journalist, I just wanted to know, how much solid journalism goes into, how much journalism versus just pure good acting goes into shows like The Colbert Report and The Daily Show? Because those are hilarious.
Those are great, yeah. So Colbert Report, Daily Show. There's a lot of journalism there because in many ways, they do great journalism because though it's a comedy show and they're to make you laugh, they're not just doing slapstick humor. They're actually making real news, or the way they see real news, and making it entertaining. So a lot of journalism goes into it. It is entertainment, it is acting, it is comedy, but really the core of that show is, or those shows, is researching stories and how outrageous some politicians are or some people are in what they decide on. So a lot of journalism goes into the shows, you know. Yes?
What do you like covering more, international stories or like Bay Area based?
Both, but since we're a Bay Area station, we're local news, I like local news. You know, this is what we do. You know, what happens here really does affect what you guys do every day, whether you know it or not. And leads me to one thing, you know, when you're doing your story, and we tell this to our reporters, we'll say it tonight, say it to you guys here in your projects, don't be one-dimensional in whatever you're doing. Try to have layers in your work. So say there's what most people might say is kind of just a boring topic, the drought. Sounds pretty boring, the topic, right? The California drought. So how do you do a story on the drought that's not just save water, we need water, the drought's not good? That's pretty boring. And really that's what it is. So if I'm working for the Talon and for some reason we say we need to do a story on the drought, then you have to find a layer. The first layer is the facts. We're in a drought. It's the worst drought we've had since 1976 or whatever the stats are, and you need to conserve water. So that's the baseline facts. That's pretty boring, isn't it? Just to read that. Would you read that in the Town? You kind of look at it and say, oh, okay, great. So how does it affect, now then your next question is, okay, so we have the baseline facts, let's make it compelling and interesting to our audience. So the audience for the Talon is Los Altos High School students. So now you're getting to the core here. Okay, so how does the drought affect Los Altos High School students? And how do we write that in a compelling way? Well, how about we go talk to the landscaper, the gardener, you know, the grounds creator, and say, all right, how's the drought going to affect us? They're going to say, well, if this drought continues, we can no longer water the front lawns. Now that's pretty interesting. So my lead for that story would be, at this rate, when you drive to school or walk to school or get dropped off to school, those beautiful green front lawns at Los Altos High School will be brown. At this rate, this great soccer team we have here at Los Altos High School will no longer be able to play here because the field will be brown grass. So now all of a sudden you've taken what many think a boring drought story and you have a local impact to this campus specifically. And you're talking to the landscaper, you're talking to the teachers, and you're talking to students, and you're gonna get reaction of brown grass up front, no soccer team anymore because they can't play here, they have to play an all-away game. And so that's an impact that's kind of interesting. So you've taken a boring story and made it somewhat compelling and interesting here. So we try to do that every night, every newscast. How do you take stories and have different layers to them? What's your name?
Albert?
Albert?
Yeah.
So say Albert wins the Tom Jones Scholarship. What college might you want to go to?
Stanford.
Okay, Albert wins the Tom Jones Scholarship to go to Stanford University. So if I'm writing an article on Albert, the boring way to say, Albert, what's your last name?
Cool.
Albert Guo, great student, Los Altos High School, wins the Tom Jones Scholarship for Stanford. He's really excited. Okay, I got the facts, you know, that he's excited, he wins the award, and he wants to go to Stanford. But get a different layer, you know. Why did he win the award? How did he study, or what did he do to get that award? What's his family background like? You know, did he do something quirky? Did he spit gum out the first night, on air? Find something about that. Then we can say, you know what? Albert said he researched for this award, not at home, not at school, but he has this little cave he's built at Chute Park in downtown Los Altos, and that's where he enjoys studying for this award, and that's how he got it. So all of a sudden that becomes somewhat interesting. It's not just he won the award, he's a great guy, and he wants to go to Stanford. So try to find those different layers in your work, and then your work becomes more exciting, and your articles or what goes on air becomes more compelling as well. Down the middle, half and half. Unless you work for certain networks. So if you work for MSNBC, they want to lean left towards liberals. If you work for Fox News, they want to lean right. So for them, it's kind of part of their shtick, part of their business plan. But for the rest of us, most of us, you try to be down the middle. I don't think there's such thing, though, just human nature, to be exactly down the middle. But the point is, you don't want to be overt about it. So if there's a policy that President Obama is deciding upon, you want to try to just report straight down the middle. But I don't think human nature, you can do it. You're going to lean just a little this way or just a little that way, I'm saying. But it's a nice challenge, it's an interesting challenge, and hopefully I know as NBC, we're pretty responsible about how we do things. Always give the other side to something. You know, so the drought, God, we keep coming back to that story, but you know, the drought, there's some legislation about farmers, and it might hurt some farmers or help some farmers, and it's kind of Republican-led legislation or Democratic-led legislation. You want to try to be fairly down the middle on that. How's the talent going? Can I ask you? What are some of the stories that or some of the issues that are coming up on your end?
Well, we have an issue coming out in the next couple weeks, and specific articles or just overall?
Overall, you know, what do you like about the direction of the paper, and maybe what are some of the challenges?
Let's see, this year has been really strong. We've had some really good editorials on local things that I think have been really applicable to the large student body, like taco truck stuff, things like that.
Oh yeah, I read about that taco truck stuff.
I worked personally on a big spread for undocumented immigration, so that was really cool for us, and that has been continuing. We got interviewed by a Stanford radio station, which is kind of cool. So seeing things like continue on and pick up. But it's just been a really strong year, so hopefully it will continue.
That's good. That's good to know. Yeah, it's just you know, someone asked, you know, international news or local news. I mean, international news is great, and if I was working for CNN, then I would say international news is what I enjoy, and I love it. But our business plan, our business model is here locally to figure it out. Like the town, you want to do everything that's around or of interest to a high school, you know, this high school specifically. Okay, a few more things about television I'll get into now. You know the little earpiece we wear? Do you guys know that we wear a little earpiece? So that gets us connected to our producer. So one of the cool things about TV is things are happening or can happen. You know, breaking news, you always hear that. We're following breaking news. And in that earpiece that I have, my producer, who's in the booth, maybe 20 yards away from me in a secured booth, is telling me, okay, we've got a story. Let's talk about the plane crash last summer at SFO, Asiana Airlines. Horrible story, right? Tragic story, 3 people die. I mean, you don't see that often, especially around here, plane crashing at SFO. And so we were on the air for 8 straight hours. And the information is just coming into you in real time. And that's where you kind of get that Peter Jennings moment with all these people are feeding you information in your ear as you're also talking on camera. And you're also hearing someone talk to you about different information. Okay, we have a reporter on the scene, toss to that reporter. He's going to talk about the hospital ER rooms being full. So I say, okay, well, we've just learned we have George Kiriyama. He's at SFO, SF General right now. George, we understand you're talking about the ER rooms being full. And then he'll go. And then we'll hear something else. Okay, now we have Jean Ellie. She's on the tarmac with the fire department, and they might have run over some of the passengers in the haste to get to the airline. So then, boom, we go over here and talk to Jean Ellie. So those are tragic stories, but exciting in terms to get your blood pumping, right? Of covering something in real time. So that's interesting. And then there's times when you kind of mess up. They're telling you something, and you've seen all newscasters kind of go through a brain fart or something like that, where they're not able to connect with or they send it out to Jean Ellie, and Jean Ellie's not there. She's sitting there like this, right? Very Daily Show. Oh, we've lost Jean Ellie's live transmission. So you just have to stay on your feet when you do my job, and I think that's one of the most exciting parts. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that you kind of filter news stories. Only the most important and relevant stuff gets in. Regarding the 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and 11 p.m. news, is the content in the 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. news stuff that didn't make the cut for the 5 p.m. news?
No. In fact, our whole point is if it didn't make the 5 o'clock news, whatever stories didn't, why would it be good to make, why would it be good enough to make the 6? So in this market, in this area, there's enough stories that things that don't get run at 5, they might get run at 6 if it's good enough, but usually there's a whole fresh batch at 6, or a different way to tell a story. Now, if we do a big story on Tesla, the new car, and how the new reviews came out, they're really doing great in sales. That's a story that we'll probably want to do, or let's go back to last night, Safeway gets sold. That's a big story because a lot of people here shop at Safeway, your parents do, and it's a big part of this. It's a huge employer in the Bay Area, so that's a big story. We're going to run it at 5, 6, and 11 p.m. because it's so relevant to all of us. But we're not going to run, hopefully we're not going to run the same version of it. Right, at 5 we might talk about the actual deal with the company at the bottom. At 6 we'll talk about the background of Safeway and how many employers and where the headquarters are going to move to, because Safeway is based in Pleasanton, now they're going to move to Boise. What are all those people going to do? They're going to be out of a job, potentially. And then 11 o'clock, we talked about the price impact. So you have 3 different story angles for one story. So hopefully you're renewing it all the time. Yes?
The 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 11 o'clock news, and you could just make it the 5 to 7 o'clock news.
You could. Advertising, programming, there's a lot of things involved. 5 to 5:30 is local. 5:30 to 6 is national with Brian Williams. 6 to 7 is local again. So really it is a 5 to 7 block, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. of news, but you're cutting up the pie. Local, national, local. And then again, local. But it's a good question. Yes, another question over here? Sorry. No? So as it goes, and also what happens now, in terms of ratings, each night we'll know, there's little ratings scores that come out. So I'll go into work at 3 o'clock and I'll check our computer, our ratings computer, and it'll tell you how many people watched us, or generally speaking, how many people watched us last night. So usually we're at 11 o'clock p.m., NBC, where I am, usually we're number 1 or number 2 at 11 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, we're number 2 or number 3. And at 5 o'clock, we're number 1 or number 2. So it all just varies. Our competition, so everyone's just cutthroat, right? It's good competition. We want to be better than ABC, we want to be better than CBS or so forth. But each newscast kind of varies of who watches more. And the big reason for that is what was on before that newscast. So, you guys watch any NBC shows? What's your favorite NBC show? Anyone watch the NBC show? What's that?
The Tonight Show.
The Tonight Show, great. So, a lot of people will tune in for the Tonight Show, so we'll see those people that are watching our newscast because A, either they really like our newscast, or B, they're just waiting for the Tonight Show to start. So you'll get that effect on ratings. But every night, you get the ratings, and after every month, it tabulates, and there's a big winner for the month, and the ratings set your advertising. So if you go to Coca-Cola, or if you go to Tesla, or whoever an advertiser is, and you can say, okay, we're charging you X amount of dollars, we're going to charge you a little more because we're number 1, or we're going to charge you a little less because we're number 3, because it's all about impact. And that's ratings for anything, for your website, for the TV part of it, or anything like that. Yeah.
How time consuming is the job, like, outside of work, when you're not at the station?
It's pretty time consuming because I'm not officially on the clock until 3 p.m. But I told you earlier, when I wake up until 3 p.m. now through the morning, I'm thinking about the job, or I'm reading about what's happening, or I'm watching CNN. So I'm always kind of connected. So really I am working from the moment I get up, but it's not. It's what I enjoy doing. I don't have to say, this is a drag, let me start reading the Chronicle, or let me start going online to Yahoo or CNN, or let me start reading some blogs. This is a real drag. It's more like, ooh, I'm interested. What's happening in Ukraine today? What's happening with the parking issue in Palo Alto today? All these things. So it's time consuming, but it's enjoyable work. It's a craft, I really like it. But then officially at 3 p.m. I'm on.
You
Yes.
started to go into so you CNN, kind of the
Oh.
local papers. Where do you get your information? How do you sort through when there's conflicting information?
How do I get where and how do I get my information? So I, like you guys, you probably have, you go to certain spots. But for me, I try to go to the most trusted spots. CNN, our locals, Chronicle, Mercury, SF Gate, online or in print. I'll go to Huffington Post, read blogs, ESPN, CNBC, and really Twitter is a big thing for me. For journalists, Twitter is huge because I will follow everyone from business write-ups to sports write-ups to politics. So the next question is, how is it a trusted source? If it's some outrageous report, you just have to check the source. If it's some organization or publication you've never heard of, then I'm not gonna put too much trust in it. But if it's something that's legitimate with a somewhat of a brand name and a backing, then it's 99% or 90% believable, then you have to keep researching. But yeah, I have kind of in the way I prep, I go to those websites the most. So I'm trying to think exactly. CNBC is great for business, ESPN for sports, and then the locals here. Even smaller publications, the Palo Alto Daily News, or the Oakland Tribune, or the Fremont Argus, I think it's called, something. These smaller microsites that have hyper local news gives you great story ideas. And then what I watch on TV, like I mentioned, and I'll watch different sides too. I'll watch MSNBC to find out what the left-leaning agenda is. I'll watch Fox News. I think watching MSNBC and Fox is fascinating because you're seeing, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you're seeing those points of view and what they're trying to hammer to their viewers. So it's interesting what you watch and how you watch. But you have to be careful because you don't want to put too much stock into something that's not necessarily a trusted source. So when you read blogs, they're great because it can lead you to something. So someone's blog, some of the best content you're going to get. However, you don't know exactly where that blogger is coming from and if that blogger is legit. So if I read something interesting in a blog, which I do daily, I'll then try to fact check it to something that's more credible. So it's a process, it's a combination. It's like when you're cooking, you're adding a bunch of ingredients in, so that's how journalism is. You're adding a lot of ingredients, you're mixing it up, and then you're using your journalism ethics to make sure it's accurate, and then deliver it, write it, or give it to your viewers. Yes?
Can you tell us a little bit about the different kinds of jobs in the newsroom?
Sure.
So other than, because your job is obviously highly visible, and then we know there's producers and photographers, but there's other people who do fact checking and research.
Yeah, so in the newsroom, you'll walk in and you'll see just a bunch, it's like a classroom, you just see a bunch of people. But in terms of how many people you see on air, you see maybe, anchors, there's 8 or 10 of us, 8, 9 or 10, 11 of us. But the bulk of the newsroom are behind the scenes people. So there's producers who sit in the booth, they're talking to you in your ear, they help stack the show, what order stories go in, when we're gonna go to breaking news. They're critical. They're like our guide dog if we were blind. They're the guide dog. They're telling you what's going on behind the scenes, and they're guiding the newscast. Anchors, we're delivering the newscast. Reporters, they're on scene, reporting the news on location. There's also writers who are not on TV, they're not in the booth, they're not on location. They're at their desk in the newsroom, and they're writing copy, they're writing scripts. And I will work with the writers to tweak their scripts. Photographers, you saw one of the photographers that came in, so he's capturing all the video. Then there's a huge contingency of people, of assignment desk people. They're the ones that are sitting on the desk and they're listening to police scanners, they're online, they're on Twitter. Anything that comes in, they're tracking. So the SFO plane crash, our assignment desk heard it because they heard SFPD on the little scanners, and there's a bunch of scanners up there. They're listening to police calls or fire calls. And they, wait a second guys, we're hearing something happening at SFO, there's a lot of chatter on the fire department scanner, that they're mobilizing a lot of fire trucks at SFO. Something's going on because they wouldn't be calling for 20 fire trucks all of a sudden. And so that leads us then to call SFO and then send a reporter out. So that's the assignment desk. Yes?
How do anchors decide who presents what news?
Which story?
Yeah.
Usually the producer. Producer is kind of the quarterback of the newscast. He or she will say, okay, Raj, you're going to do the lead story. Jessica, you're going to do the second story. Raj, you're going to do the interview with this analyst. Jessica, you're going to do the weather chat. So it's all divvied up. So we know going in what stories we have. Unless there's breaking news, and then all hell breaks loose. Okay, as we wrap it up, a few more minutes. Any last second questions here? Another facet we talked about, we have a whole investigative unit of reporters and writers, so they'll kind of sit in their own area, and they don't come on TV every day. They work on deep stories, so they might work on a story for 2 or 3 months without ever being on air, and those are some real specialized reporters and writers. They will go undercover They'll have secret cameras, they'll stake out people, and it's fascinating. Their work is really interesting because you won't see them, all of a sudden they'll come in with a beard and a hat, and it looks like they've been in a cave, and they'll say, oh yeah, we kind of wanted to fit in, we're doing a story on, drug dealing in whatever community. So they can't come in a suit and look perfect, so when they're undercover, literally they're like undercover policemen. So it's fascinating to hear their stories and what they do. So that's our investigative team. And then our weather team, each department has their own in the newsroom.
How many employees do you think you have on your station?
I think there's a little more than 100.
Okay.
And, half of that is also the executive side, sales and research and marketing. But in terms of the newsroom, about 50 or 60. So a lot of different people in the newsroom doing different functions, yes.
Do you say that number is growing or decreasing?
For many stations, that number is decreasing. But for a strong station like NBC, we're owned by Comcast, so it's a pretty healthy company that's growing. And the reason it's growing is not necessarily to bring in more reporters, but we're growing our web presence. So our website staff went from, a few years ago, there were 6 people in our website staff. Now there's 20. So it's more than tripled in staff that's growing. So, yeah.
How many cameras do you have to rotate looking at during these casts?
3. Good question. So I'm on set, and I'll do the top story. So tonight you can do the top story with camera 1. Then our director, not our producer, will say, okay, Raj, your next story is on camera 2. I'll turn to camera 2. They'll say, okay, now you're gonna do an introduction to the story on camera 2, but then you're gonna toss to a reporter on camera 1. So I'll say, okay, today I spoke at Los Altos High School. What a great school it is. Let's now send it over to George Kariyama, who's on the Los Altos campus with more. George. So that's all fun, tricks of the trade. It just gives you a different perspective. As a viewer, if you were just on one camera the whole time, it gets a little monotonous. So they just try to turn it around, give you some movement on the set. And they're telling you that in your ear. And I wear makeup. That's one of the parts of the job that's not too interesting or fun for me. So before the 5 o'clock news, around 4:45, I'll go into the makeup room, and I'm a pro at makeup now. So I do my little eye stuff, I don't even know what it's called, and then your powder, your HD powder, and I'll tell my wife, like, gosh, you guys go through a lot, women every day to put on makeup. So on the weekends, the one thing that would be the only downside of my job is the makeup. So on the weekends, I can't wait to not wear makeup. And then at the end of the shift, you're wiping it off, and it's all gucky and sad. I wouldn't recommend makeup for the guys, or for the women, actually. And then now with HD, everything is really, you can see your skin in a big way, so so now they have HD powder to hide the blemishes. It's a little embarrassing talking about makeup sometimes. You guys are all welcome to, you should come in the studio one time and see a live broadcast. It's phenomenal. It's this chorus of a lot of people doing things, and then it all somehow just comes together in a somewhat refined 30 minutes or 60 minutes. But behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. If you came into a newsroom on any given day, you're going to hear a couple people arguing about what story to run and what story not to run. You'll hear some people, busy with editing their copy, a lot of people writing, a lot of collaborating. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Have a good day.